My Instagram audience has doubled in 2023.
And that's because Instagram has changed their algorithms again.
But this time, for the better. At least for us as creators, your mileage may vary as a user.
The best part? Well, none of this is speculation. The head of Instagram literally came out and explained how the algorithms work.
That's right, algorithms, not one. There are multiple, and we're gonna demystify all of it for you.
And give you actionable insights to make sense of it all for your church.
Well, hey there, and welcome to the Pro Church Tools Show. We're here to help you and your church navigate the biggest communication shift in 500 years. I'm Brady, your host. I'm joined as always by my co-host. He calls his fantasy football team Bishop's Bullies, but they were the ones that got bullied this weekend in our head-to-head matchup. It's Alexander Mills.
Hello.
You can watch full-length episodes on YouTube. You can listen on your favorite podcasting platform. And today we're talking about how Instagram's algorithms have changed again. And everything that we're going to be discussing is not speculative. And that's what's really exciting about this. For many years, virtually every platform has kept their algorithm as this mysterious force that affects our lives and distributes our creativity. But what's cool is that on Instagram, at least, they have been more open than most platforms about how their algorithms work. And the head of Instagram, Adam Mosseri, came out earlier this year and did a big write-up on like how each of the algorithms across the entire platform work. And really, this is the best place to start because Instagram is not a single algorithm, but a series of algorithms. And the way that Mosseri described this is, quote, a variety of algorithms, classifiers, and processes, each with its own purpose, to make sure Instagram users see the content that most interests them. What was your response when you learned that it was multiple algorithms and not one?
So it's like, you know, sometimes when you think about the algorithm, because it's invisible, it's intangible, sometimes you think about it the way you think about Father God, you know, like
Daddy algorithm.
Yes, like just this unseen, invisible thing in the clouds or the cloud that is maybe dictating behavior or pulling strings or whatever. But it's like you can't see it, but you can feel it. It's like it's this force. And when I learned that it was more than one, it's like, well, then whatever I thought about what that thing was is probably not what it is. And it's like, it's the Dunning-Kruger effect, right? Like the less you know about something, the more confident you are in what it is. And then you learn, like, Adam's like, yeah, there's like, is multiple algorithms. It's like, oh, okay. So I actually know like very little to nothing about how content is served to me online.
Multiple algorithms, not quite a trinity though, because we've got four of them. You've got an algorithm for Reels. And when we say Reels, we mean like when you're actually in the Reels feed on Instagram and you're swiping. An algorithm for the feed itself, an algorithm for stories, and an algorithm for the Explore page. We've already mispronounced algorithm twice. It's not boding well.
Don't ask me to spell it.
For your guys.
Yeah.
So why is it done this way? Well, Mosseri said, quote, people tend to look for their closest friends and stories. They use Explore to discover new content and creators, and they like to be entertained in Reels. And so you can even hear how Instagram themselves are thinking about these platforms. And in all of the quotes that we read, but also as we describe these algorithms as Instagram has described it to us, one of the best things you can do, listener, viewer, is not just think about the information you're receiving, but think about what the head of Instagram is saying, and then what that must mean about how he, and by extension, the entire directing team of Instagram thinks about their own platform. Because if that's how they conceptualize it, it has tremendous application and takeaways for how we approach the platform. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to fight the wave of Daddy Algo.
Yeah.
The Armenian algorithm. Are you a Calvinist algorithm believer? You know, oh, it's predestined my content was going to perform like crap.
Yes. Maybe that would help you sleep at night.
Yeah, honestly.
Yeah, it's out of my hands.
Oh, man. You were predestined to fail. You were predestined to be shadow banned.
Yeah. It does make sense though that there is an algorithm for each section of the Instagram app, because when you think about it, and when you think about it in this way, maybe folks who are listening to this show right now are thinking about it this way for the first time, but it's resonating. Like, right, I go to stories to see like what my friends are up to. I'm in the Reels because I am stressed out about the war in Israel and I just want to laugh. And so like I'm in Reels. Explore, I don't know how many people use Explore, but it's like it's a mosaic of all sorts of different type of content. And then we use the feed the way we use the feed, which is pretty much not at all anymore. But so it makes sense that not one algorithm can apply to all of those sections of the app, and honestly 4 different types of really different types of content in those 4 different sections. So, I mean, thanks to Adam for laying this out and saying yeah, this is how it works, because now that we read it, it's that makes sense.
Adam, first human.
Oh, this is galaxy brain thinking, and I'm concerned for where this episode is going to go from
None
here.
of this is in the notes.
I know,
right? I'm downloading it.
Yikes.
As we speak.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking about, though, as you describe it that way, Instagram would have started as a single algorithm. Right? But as all these platforms have kind of abandoned their initial specialty in the world of social and have embraced all of these different types of content mediums, this new platform popularized this, we need to bring it in. This new platform popularized this, we need to bring it in. Again, getting back to thinking about what these directors are saying and what that must mean about how they see the platform. They would have had meetings when they decided, you know what's cool? Snapchat. What if we stole it for ourselves? At which point someone surely piped up and said, well, can we just take the feed algorithm and apply it to stories? And at some point they realized, no, if we're gonna copy this feature from another platform and try to bring it into our own, we have to treat it essentially as its own product inside of Instagram. And so it's helpful to think of Instagram, and assuredly other platforms as well, as not singular monoliths, because they're not governed that way, as they've admitted, but as these enterprise platforms of individual platforms within.
I have a thought about this.
Okay, is it back to our galaxy brain?
No.
Okay.
So the feed, in my experience, is becoming less popular to post to, specifically photos, right? As the rise of short form video increases, and engagement on short form video eclipses engagement on 4x5 still images. I wonder if, because there are multiple algorithms at play here, if you could focus on one type of content in one of those areas of the app, like just reels or just stories, and really succeed as a profile in that algorithm while forsaking the feed, because that's a separate type of discovery, a separate type of algorithm. So you could really double down on reels, not post to the feed, and still have real success on Instagram as your profile as a whole, because you're not even engaging in the other section, and that algorithm doesn't bother you. Does that make sense?
It does, and I don't think that would be advisable. My application, though, for these multiple algorithms, and I'll get into why I don't think that's advisable based on what Instagram has said a little bit later, is that, oh goodness, no, the application is right here. It's right now. It's next in the notes. I butchered it. So IG is interconnected. What you do in the feed affects your stories and vice versa. We don't approach them in the same way. We need to treat them differently, but they are still interconnected, meaning when you excel in Reels, if you're not excelling in stories and its unique requirements, you're actually limiting the upside of your success in Reels. And what's best is, in the same way we describe online and offline in the church world, as working together harmoniously. And that when they're each kind of doing their own thing and working in tandem, that's when they're both hitting their stride and doing their best. When you treat Reels the way you would treat stories, or when you treat stories the way you would treat Reels, you're actually hurting your overall impact on Instagram. When you treat both of them as the specialties they are, that's when you can see real good traction on social. Let's talk about each of the individual algorithms. First, the feed. So there are a bunch of ranking factors that go into the feed, and Instagram calls them signals. Messeri said that IG uses thousands of different signals to rank posts, but here are the most important in order when it comes to what you see on Instagram. There are 4 of them here. 2 of them are related to you, the user of Instagram, and then the other 2 are related to the creator of the post itself. So the first is activity, posts that you have liked, shared, saved, or commented on. And this is an experiment that you can do yourself, because in a way, the algorithms are incredibly sophisticated, incredibly complex. In another way, they're like a dog, where the dog will sit and you give the dog a treat, and the dog goes, I will sit, and you give the dog a treat. We're all just little animals with a clicker. Because invariably what you will find is when you like, comment, or engage activity with content of a new creator in a different vertical, suddenly you'll start seeing them everywhere. So I realized this weekend that a couple of people their work that I respect, they follow me on Instagram. And I was like, oh, you know what? It's not really cool that I don't follow them back. So I did. And now my feed is just them, and them. Because I don't have too much activity with other creators on Instagram.
Right.
I'm mostly using it for publishing and then interacting with all of you, but not too much with other creators. So Instagram for me, they do everything based on hover time and based on whose stories I watch. If I follow someone new, they're like, oh my gosh, he followed someone new. Show them everything. Yeah. And so your mileage might vary if you have a lot of activity on Instagram, but when I make a change, I can see the algorithm in its just binary simplicity be like, show more, he did something, finally. Second signal is information about the post, how popular a post is. So this is from the creator side of things, how many people are engaging and how quickly they're liking, commenting, sharing, and saving. So I follow this new person, a friend in real life. I follow them, and
It's me.
it's true. I never. I probably see that I follow
You do
apps.
follow me.
So I followed this friend of mine, and the posts that I saw in the feed, they came right away. That was my action. What posts of his did I see? His best of the best.
Right.
They were like, let's give Brady this guy's best stuff because we want him to have, he's shown he liked this guy. Well, let's make sure that we're showing him the best of what this guy, according to our platform's metrics, has to offer. Third signal, information about the person who posted. Messeri says, quote, this helps us get a sense for how interesting the person might be to you and includes signals like how many times people have interacted with that person in the past few weeks. So if you looked at my Instagram, it can be broken down into really 3 categories. Christian creators and or churches, fashion, and tattoos. So if I kind of venture beyond those 3 categories, that's going to be this new thing that Instagram's going to have to figure out because it's going against what I typically do. Now, if I followed another tattoo artist, if I followed another fashion brand, they would be like, oh yeah, okay, treat that new account follow similar to how we're treating all the other ones because his behavior is consistent with how he's always performing on this platform, behaving. Let's treat that the same way. And then finally, the user's history of interacting with someone. So this is now not someone new, but this is whether or not you have engaged with the creator before. Messeri says, quote, in the feed, the 5 interactions we look at most closely are how likely you are to spend a few seconds on a post, comment on it, like it, share it, and tap on the profile photo. The more likely you are to take an action, the higher up in the feed you'll see the post. If you've done any of those things before, that's predictive of future behavior that you might do it again. So the takeaway for me here is no weeks off is of paramount importance. We have this framework. We call it the social ministry mountain. If you're watching this, we'll put it on the screen right now. The social ministry mountain contextualizes for churches how what our efforts are online can translate to offline, to in-person. The foundation of the social ministry mountain, meaning you can't scale any other part of the mountain until you do this first, is no weeks off. You have to be consistently creating quality content. Why? Well, because Instagram is looking at the history of how people have engaged with your content in the past. So if you want your existing followers to engage with your content, it's not just enough for them to follow. They need to be consistently revisiting your content and engaging with it, watching it, viewing it, liking it, commenting, sharing, saving. And then you also need to be having no weeks off because you need to publish enough content to have one of those top 3 rise to the top so that when someone follows you for the first time or when someone is discovering you, Instagram has something that is proven to be loved by a lot of people that they're willing to share it with somebody else. I follow that new person on Instagram. They show me their top 3. That person only gained those top 3 by publishing probably 200 posts.
Yeah, I am a perfect case study in this. But in the inverse. I have taken about a year off of posting on Instagram. I used to post daily on Instagram.
I actually thought maybe I didn't follow you for a second.
Yeah, no, seriously. For any of the listeners who don't know, like I have a specialty coffee blog on Instagram and used to have a really good, I mean, still have a good following there, but used to have a really deep sense of community there in the way that folks would engage with me through stories, DMs, in the comments of posts that I would post, and just came into a season of my life where I didn't have creative energy to siphon off into this area of my life. I had to delegate it to other areas of my life. And so posting about coffee on Instagram it fell by the wayside. I don't regret that. I don't lament that. But there are some times where I do have energy to give to it. And I notice now that because I've taken weeks off, when I post, not only is like my visibility and my engagement low, but I have this, it's hard to explain, but I have this sense that like, I'm not starting from scratch in the way that like I have 0 followers, but as far as like social trust goes and like how I can sense that Instagram is showing my content to the people in the specialty coffee space comparatively to other folks who have accounts like me who are posting regularly. Like the mountain to climb feels so insurmountable that I just haven't even dared to start posting again in a way that like would result in really good interaction. So I'm a good case study for this in the inverse. If you want, and we're talking about church ministry here, right? Sharing the most important story ever been told, and so it's of the utmost importance to not take any weeks off because we do have such a valuable story to share. We're doing ministry through social media. We're not just talking about specialty coffee, and so it's so important to gain traction by doing this and then maintain the traction and not lose your position by the signal that you're giving to Instagram when you stop posting.
Right, because churches come to me and they say, we tried social, and our pastor's like, well, it didn't affect anything we're doing in person. And I said, well, how long did you do it for? Oh, a couple of months. I was like, okay. And then I look and I'm like, there was really a burst of inspiration there. And then you likely got distracted by something else. And I get it. You know, we wear multiple hats in ministry in the same way that Alex is describing, like he needed to divert some of his attention from social to other things in his life. We have that in our jobs at church, right? But the prerequisite to the rest of the social ministry mountain is no weeks off. It has to be the constant. And the great thing is we're not influencers. So we're not selling brand deals where we need to reach a certain amount of impressions or a certain amount of views. And thus we need to post every day across virtually every platform. No, we're church. We're organizations that can post 1, 2, 3, 4 times a week. That's fine. You know, ideally 2, 1 might be a bit low, but the sustainable rhythm every week, no weeks off. Doesn't have to be no days off, but no weeks off is the prerequisite. Let's talk about the stories algorithm, distinct in many ways from the feed. Here are the signals Instagram uses for stories. Number 1, viewing history. How often a user has viewed an account's stories. The more often they view a certain account's stories, the more likely they are to appear first.
We know this.
Number 2, engagement history. How often a user engages with that account's story, such as sending a reaction or response. So, viewing, number 1, engagement, number 2, different on stories. Meaning, if you're not using polls, if you're not responding to DMs, if you're not using the interactive features of stories, if you're just taking your post and posting it to stories and be like, hey, here's a new post, or if it's just simply for viewing and nothing else, you're missing an entire signal here. And then number 3, closeness. The user's relationship with the author overall and how likely they are to be friends or family. So, getting back to Alex, he hasn't been posting in the feed very much, but he still posts on stories. And guess what? I see every single one because Instagram has determined correctly that we are friends in real life. There is friendship there, not just brand relationship. And so my takeaway from this is that all things being equal, it may be more difficult for a church account to rank in stories relative to a pastor account simply because it's a brand versus a person. So this is distinct from the feed. That is not going to be the same case for the feed. It's not like having a pastor account is better from an Instagram standpoint in the feed versus a brand account. You could make the argument, and I think it might be a compelling one, that a individual account, because of humanity, is going to perform better than a brand account because humans relate more to humans. But Instagram's not throttling that. That's just human nature. What they are throttling, or what they are algorithmically affecting, is stories ranking because we're more likely to relate to real people. I have friendship with many people. I have 0 friendships with brands. So even the fashion brands that I follow, typically they are people running the fashion brand, and that's what shows up. Secondly, your stories need to be driving engagement. And this gets back to what I said before. We can't simply be posting our feed post to the story and expecting that to be a winning strategy. They're treated differently from an algorithm standpoint. So that's not what Instagram really wants. You can sprinkle it in here and there. And I personally have been revisiting my stories strategy because I've kind of gotten a bit lazy with that. I've been focusing so much on reels and carousels and the feed and discovery this year that stories have kind of taken a back seat. And so I'm kind of reformulating that strategy for myself because it needs work. So, you know, I've been doing this as well, and I need to sprinkle in a promotion here and there. But if it's the majority, right, this gets back to the 1 in 5 rule is probably useful in this case. If the majority of what we're publishing there has no opportunity for engagement aside from someone responding via DM, that means there's room for improvement there because we're neglecting one of the key signals.
Here's one quick tip about stories. The thing about stories is there's very little to no discovery element at all. Like you're not being served accounts in your stories that you don't follow generally unless it's a paid ad. And so for that reason, the insights of how people view your stories, at least for me, have been really valuable. So we talk about this a lot when posting content to Reels, TikTok. There is an opportunity for virality, and you just never know when it's going to happen. And so sometimes you'll have 1,000 people watch your video. Sometimes you have 10,000 people, 100,000, 1,000,000 people, right? You have this opportunity for discovery. In stories, that's just not true because they're not being served that way. And so the insights for how many people watch my stories are immediate feedback of like, this is a good story or not.
Great point.
Right? You could post a piece of content to the Reels, the best piece of content you've ever posted, and it may not go off. You could post that same content a week later and it might go off, right? Or you could post a piece that's not as good and it might go off. In stories, you get immediate feedback. So when I post a story, I've got 18,000 followers. When I post a story and it's getting hundreds of views or 1,000 views or 1,500 views, I know that was not, the algorithm is telling me by the amount of views it has, this is not a story we're putting at the front of people's line of stories. But if I get a story that's getting 2, 3, 4,000 views, I know, okay, this story is being well viewed and well interacted with by my followers. And so I'm using that as an immediate feedback loop. Okay, when I share a post from my feed to the stories, it gets hundreds of views. That means it sucks, right? That as a story. That means that people are swiping past this as fast as they can. People are not clicking through this. So it's not a strategy I use. When I ask a provocative question or a poll, it gets thousands of views. It's immediate feedback loop. Okay, I need to do more of this because the algorithm is telling me it's serving this higher priority to more people by the amount of views it's getting. And so you get that immediate feedback loop. So if you are going to post to stories as a church account, which, like you said, can be a little bit more challenging than if it's just like a pastoral account, pay attention to the views and the engagement. If it's a few dozen views or a few hundred views comparatively to your thousands of followers, forsake that strategy. If you're getting thousands of views because you posted a poll, that's great feedback. Do that again.
Interesting thing happened to me this week on Instagram stories that punctuates this point perfectly. There was a brand account at the front. It was the #1 story. I was like, I didn't even know I followed this brand account. It was a drone account. It's like, hey, we show all beautiful drone photos. And I was like, I have no idea who this was. It was a brand account. I click in the story. Beautiful vista. Take a guess what else was in this.
There was probably a lady in there.
There was a naked human in the middle of the shot. Nudity. I was like,
Yes.
what?
Yeah.
And I unfollow the account.
Yeah.
And this speaks to the lack of sophistication by Instagram. Like, everyone likes this.
Yes.
Like, everyone likes this.
Yes.
Like, this isn't Alex going from like 50 a couple hundred views to like a couple thousand. This one's doing well. It's just like, no one has ever had more views on their account relative to followers than this.
Yeah.
This was the first Instagram story that everyone's getting discovered because somebody did not flag it as they should have. Anyway, let's talk about the Explore page algorithm. And
You'll see naked ladies there probably.
everything on the Explore page is also going to apply to the Reels algorithm.
Okay.
So when you're actually swiping through Reels. So here are the signals IG uses for Explore. #1, post popularity. Not surprising. And then #2, a user's activity in Explore. I'm going to open up my Explore page right now.
Me too.
All right.
First post, the Instagram algorithm has changed.
What? Oh, that's sick. All right, I've got tattoo, fashion, tattoo, fashion, tattoo, Christian, Instagram content. Grow on Instagram.
Yeah.
You know, how to do stuff on Instagram.
Pizza, coffee, graphic design. Did the Reels algorithm change? Pizza, coffee, pizza, 7 red flags in your Instagram content.
So this is indicative of our behavior on Instagram. It's showing us user activity is motivating what's showing up in the Explore tab. So here's how Instagram describes how this can work. Really great practical example. Let's say you've recently liked a number of photos from a local dumpling restaurant. We then look at who else likes those photos and then what other accounts those people are interested in. Maybe people who like that dumpling spot are also into dim sum in the same area. In that case, the next time you open Explore, we might show you a photo or video from a dim sum spot in the same region.
There you go.
I want to talk about hashtags here for a moment. A lot of questions from churches about hashtags. I think hashtags were once viewed, years ago at this point, as the secret strategy to unlocking real growth. You either were the person that understood hashtags or not. And if you could just unlock.
I had a season where it was absolutely unlocked for me because at a time, I don't know if they still do it because I don't use hashtags anymore, but at a time, we're talking 5-6 years ago with Instagram, in your insights, you could see how many views came from hashtags. You would get like views from profile, views from feed, views from explore, views from hashtags. And there was a time where I could get more views on my posts from hashtags than anywhere else. And it was resulting in a lot of views, a lot of engagement, a lot of followers. Yeah.
Okay, this is fascinating insight because what I did was I went through my post insights in preparation for this show and I was looking for that exact same metric. And I looked at probably 50 posts and I could only find it even listed on 2. Curiously, why would it be listed on 2 and not any of the others? There is now under the impressions tab in your reach, explore, feed, maybe it's called home, other.
Okay.
And my sense is that hashtags are now lumped into other, which to me, again, what is Instagram saying about themselves?
Yeah.
They're saying, in this case, hashtags do not matter anymore. Let me give you some examples from data. Okay, I got 2 posts, like I mentioned, where I found this data. So the first is a post called Why Churches Fail to Develop Volunteers. This is a carousel post. 6,000 likes, 85,000 accounts reached. More than half of the accounts reached for this carousel post were non-followers, which is unusual for a carousel. You see it on Reels. Carousel is typically engaging your followers. Had 100,000 impressions, of which 3,000 came from hashtags. 90,000 came from home. And remember, more people who saw this were non-followers of me. So what can we deduce from all of that interesting information? Instagram was recommending this to non-followers in the home feed. They were not discovering it via Explore because of the hashtags.
Right.
3% of people found this because of hashtags. Second example, another carousel post. This one was called Rules for AI Your Church Should Follow. This one had 1,400 likes, 30,000 accounts reached. Only about 15% were non-followers. That's more typical for me. 40,000 total impressions of this post, of which 2,000 came from hashtags. So that's a little bit more relatively percentage-wise. That's 5% compared to 3%. But
How many hashtags are you using?
3.
Okay.
And this is what Instagram recommends now. You know, back in the day, maybe when you were seeing all these results from hashtags, it'd be like
30.
Yeah, you would use a tool to like generate hashtags and just paste them in. That is no longer best practice. We're talking 2 to 5. I almost always use 3, maybe 4 if one comes to mind. Your hashtags, and this has been true for many years now, are really just kind of the sprinkle on top of what you're doing. They are not going to materially make a difference. I still see people say hashtags, like that's what's going to put you over the edge. I don't know why people are still saying this. I'm not convinced of that whatsoever. Instagram has said as much. I see it in my own post performance. I see other creators say it. But then every so often you visit a website and they're like, hashtags, it's the game changer. And maybe it's because, you know, we publish videos about hashtags and maybe they're 5 years old, but I look at the timestamp and I'm like, and they say, no, this is this year.
No, they're probably trying to sell something.
Oh, right. Hashtagsdiscovery.com. Oh, okay, that makes sense. And so my recommendation for you is don't stress about hashtags. Churches do this. Like, what hashtags should I use? And I just like, hey, even if you got it right, and those were 2 posts where they even showed me hashtags. So I think you could fairly say that those were the best performing hashtags of the past 50 posts. Maybe there's another reason why Instagram just lumped the hashtag performance into other, but I'm guessing they did that because they don't want you to be like, wow, hashtags are doing nothing and like completely abandon it altogether, but they also don't want you to really push it hard, so they're kind of like trying to in between it. I'm not certain, but sprinkle on top, cherry on top. Yeah, it might like move it 3 to 5%, but it's not going to be the substantive game changer for you.
I already said I don't know much about algorithms, but I really do believe that like in a previous era of this platform, specifically Instagram, like hashtags were an essential part of like search indexing. So if I wanted to know more about like sourdough bread, that like posts tagged with sourdough bread it was easy for the algorithm to identify that this is what this post is about. But now that like most of the posts we ingest are short form video, these algorithms are indexing the actual content of the video. Like if it's a voiceover or something, they're indexing the words you say. They're indexing keywords in your caption. And so hashtags just aren't playing a role in search indexing anymore. I don't have to go to, when I'm looking for something on Instagram, I don't have to type in hashtag sourdough. Like I just type in sourdough. And then once I engage with one post or one account about sourdough, the algorithm just starts responding. Like my explore page is going to be sourdough baking. Like the hashtags don't do the heavy lifting. The algorithms are just more clever now.
You got to say sourdough less. I'm getting really hungry right now. But what you're observing is really important for everyone to get. What you're observing is the evolution of search engine optimization. This happened on Google and Bing and DuckDuckGo and those search engines a decade ago. The first company we ever had the first product we ever had at our company was video announcements for churches. And in keeping with pro church tools, I wanted it to have a similar naming structure. Why? The Lord met me in a dream and he said, you need to stop. But back then, he had not yet intervened.
Yes.
He was like, you know what? I'm letting these people do too much. Free will, okay? Like, again, back to that, I can't allow it.
Yeah.
So I bought the URL provideoannouncements.com. Guess what? It ranked for video announcements real quick because Google was like, oh, you're telling us it's for video announcements.
Right.
It must be. And in this case, it was, but it was really easy to game the system back then. Google eventually evolved in how they index for search. They became a lot more sophisticated, and you didn't need to explicitly tell them what you were doing. They would figure it out. We're seeing the same thing on social and have seen. We're already in this. This is not exactly recent. Back in the day, you would have to hashtag sourdough, and then Instagram would be like, oh, bread.
Right.
Nowadays, you can just say the word sourdough, and now it is being indexed in search for that purpose. And think about how on Instagram, you can talk and it will caption what you say, right? All these platforms will do that. That's great because now we don't have to write out hashtags. Guess what else they're doing? It's a transcription.
Yes.
So they know everything you've said, so they know if what you're saying this post is about, it is actually about. So I can't get on my post about, why churches fail to develop volunteers, hashtag sourdough, and expect, I'm going to reach a wide audience now. All the bread lovers are going to learn why churches fail to develop volunteers. No, Instagram would see right through that because they would know the content of my reel as I talk about it. That was a carousel, but in this case, they would know the content of the reel as they transcribe what I say because they would have an AI do it, and they're indexing all that in search with the robots.
I mean, Masseri said it, and you said it earlier. He said, there are thousands of signals that we are collecting for an individual. I don't understand that, how there can be thousands of signals for one piece of content, but this is what we're talking about. It's like even the words you're saying in your post are a signal to the algorithms to tell the platform what kind of content to serve the users, and it is a game. And thanks to Adam Masseri for giving us a little bit of insight into how the game works so that we can feel better equipped to play it. But I mean, they don't play by the rules of hashtags anymore. So, we don't have to prioritize anymore in our social strategies.
I do have one more tip, though, on how those signals work. We talked about the most important ones. I think there's actually one more important one that we didn't discuss. Well, we did, and that is showing skin. Okay? Because when we got to the summer and I started recording my reels in shorts because it's the summer and I'm wearing shorts.
I've never understood the hate that you get about wearing shorts in your videos. Like, it's like a faux pas that I don't know exists because so many people are like, what is this guy? He's wearing shorts. Be like, yeah, it's 100 degrees out. It's
hot.
Yes.
It
would be strange if I was wearing pants.
Yeah. Comment I got this week in jeans. In jeans.
I saw this one.
I'm going to call this guy out because this was public. At Darius T. Giles on Instagram commented, is anybody ever up in here talking about how thick Brady's legs are? Dude most definitely never skips leg day. Looking like a 1990s Wrangler commercial. Listen, I'm flattered. Also, I don't know if I'm flattered. But if you can ethically work in some skin. Of course I'm joking.
It's a proven strategy.
Of course I'm joking. Let's talk about how to grow, though. Let's talk about how to actually do it. So my Instagram has doubled this year. We started at the year, 40,000 followers. We're north of 80,000 now.
Hashtag thanks to the thighs.
Got him from my daddy. Big glutes,
Yeah.
big thighs. Yeah, AC/DC, they were singing about me. I am that all-American girl. What's interesting about our growth is that I had been active on Instagram, no weeks off, for a decade. And we're in a pretty small niche, relatively. Like church, social, and digital. Yes, it gets bigger every year because like younger people are serving in church and they're growing up the same way we grew up, right? We're now in the second generation of church leaders and volunteers that are like, yeah, digital is important. We were the first one originally. And we were like, please, let us have a Facebook page. And they were like, what? Well, we had 40,000 followers in this space already, which means like it was an established account. So for us to grow 100%, to double in 1 year without dramatically changing our posting volume or strategy, aside from like, oh, we have to make reels now, is dramatic. So what happened? And this is to me where the social ministry mountain is so clearly demonstrated. We'll put it back on the screen again. The social ministry mountain. We did a video on YouTube called the Church Social Media Masterclass. It's on our main channel. If you want this actual diagram, we made an entire ebook that goes along with the masterclass. It's in there. So you can take a screenshot.
I'll put that in the show notes.
Okay, great. So 4 levels, I'll describe it. 4 levels to the social ministry mountain. If you're listening, it's still easy to remember. The summit, that's the top of the mountain, is the 4th level. The base mountain, no weeks off. We talked about that. That has to be the constant. Every person affecting life change, making a difference, building something, gaining attention online, consistently creating great content for the community. Non-negotiable, no weeks off. The next step up from there, once we have achieved that sustainable rhythm, is what we call a viral for me post. And a viral for me post is simply defined as any post that you create that gets 10x the reach a normal post of yours gets. So if you typically get 200 views on an Instagram reel and you get 2,000, great. That's a viral for me post. I had one this week. Now, I'm not bragging.
Were your thighs exposed?
Darius T. Giles thinks so. Oh no, they weren't, because I was seated down with a computer on my lap. So this means it was good content. This wasn't me selling my body on the internet. Praise God. So the reason this matters to me is because we had a run of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, almost 10 reels in a row. Not performing modestly like they normally would, but underperforming.
Right.
Which was brand new. To the point where I was like, okay, did something change on Instagram? And
Which is what prompted this episode?
that is correct. I was like, did something change? And really my takeaway here is like, I don't think anything's changed. I think like when you grow 100% on Instagram in a year, everyone's kind of taking notice of like, hey, they're giving out free organic reach over here. And so it's become a little bit more competitive. But I had a post break through. Right now, it's sitting at 150,000 views. It's sitting at around 5,500 likes. And it's not 48 hours old yet. Or it is 48 hours old. If I go in, this is really interesting stuff right here. Like, I mean that sincerely. If I go into my notifications, the first notification is for that post. The second notification is for a post that is now 11 weeks old. The third notification is for the 11-week-old post. And it goes on like that pretty much back and forth. This is what a viral for me post does. It doesn't just do well for 48 hours. It has this life cycle because someone's following me, and guess what? Instagram's showing them my greatest hits. You would never open your notification feed back in the day and see posts from 11 weeks ago. You'd see today's post, today's post, today's post, yesterday's, today's, 2 days ago, today's, yesterday's. That's all it would be. And now it's like today's post, 11 weeks ago, today's post, greatest hits from 12 weeks ago. And that means that we now have this life cycle where these viral for me posts are giving us opportunity to grow. Why? Because we're reaching new audiences. And that's how we get to the third level on the social ministry mountain, which we call the 10x growth rate. The 10x growth rate is growing followers at 4% each month. Why 4% each month? Because 4% each month translates to 10x growth over 5 years. So if you have 500 followers today, if you get to that 4% monthly growth rate, that's a 10x growth rate, because over 5 years, you'll get to 5,000 followers. That type of growth for a church is dramatic. I know 5 years sounds like a long time. Like, it's really not. Because in 5 years, you'll look back at where you were right now and be like,
Yeah.
oh, that wasn't that long ago. If we were 10 times bigger on this platform, that would make a difference. Why does it make a difference? Because that's the final level before we get to the top of the mountain, the summit, which we call the crossover. Crossover events are where we start seeing online crossover to offline, where people are returning visitor cards and they're Xing out, how'd you hear about us on social media? You're having conversations in the lobby and people are saying, yeah, I was following online before I visited in person. You're a pastor. We're seeing this one all the time. We've talked about it on the show. You're out running your groceries and people are, hey, are you a pastor? You've been on my Instagram feed. You're all over my TikTok feed. That's what's happening. Those aren't examples. Those are all real stories from churches. This is what's happening when you have those crossover events. And you can see crossover events before you achieve the 10x growth rate indefinitely, but once you've gotten to that point, they become more and more predictable, more and more frequent. And so if you ever have a conversation with senior leadership and they're like, why are we doing all this? You can just show them the social ministry mountain. It contextualizes everything and makes sense of it all. And I've lived through it in the last year. The churches that we work with, we're seeing them live through it. And it all just makes sense when you put it into this type of framework.
And we've had people on the show who can testify to that as well. Real pastors from real churches who are doing the work. Trey Van Camp comes to mind, and Pastor Jeremy from Mosaic in Dubai, folks who have been posting on social, taking no weeks off for years at a time, and are now living in the fruit of that. Folks routinely coming to their church who are interacting with their content, the message of Jesus online first. It's crossing over into in-person, not just a visit to a church, but stories from these guys about folks who are becoming like ingrained members in the family, the community of faith, because they first had an interaction with that church online. So this is why this matters. This is why this episode matters. This is why talking about algorithms matter. This is why learning how to play the game matters, is because, the family of faith is what's at stake here.
I just want to make this abundantly clear that I have published maybe 200 posts on Instagram this year. And I'm going to just read through some of the view counts on them. 24,000 views, 22,000. These are real specifically where discovery is happening for the most part. 14,000, 24,000, 23,000, 25,000, 67,000, 25,000, 29,000, 43, 33, 35, 68. Okay? Starting to get a sense for it. Only 3 to 5 posts have dramatically outperformed that. I have 3 to 5 viral for me posts. 500,000 views, 600,000 views, 600,000 views. And this new one, 150. It looks like it's going to be another viral for me post.
But that's like 2.5%.
And those are the posts that are driving the growth to that 10x, right?
Yep.
The 4% monthly growth threshold, which we have surpassed in a big way this year. But we really just want that to be the baseline for growth, has been achieved by 3 to 5 of the 200 posts. So you might be thinking like, okay, so like, why am I doing all this posting? Because you only get those 3 to 5 by posting all 200. The no weeks off is the prerequisite. Alex said, you'll get immediate feedback on stories. You won't on Reels. You don't know which one is going to take off. The poor performance these last few weeks, I'm like, what is happening? I love these posts. Why are these ones not? I can't even, right? I just got to, no weeks off. Keep showing up and growth will come from there.
So good.
Hopefully we have contextualized and only mispronounced a couple of times the Instagram algorithms and how they're changing. And thank you as always for your time, attention, and trust. We will be back next week.
The best part, none of this is speculation. The head of Instagram literally came out and did something about it. Explain how this works. The best part, well, none of this is speculation. The head of Instagram literally came out and explained how